You clearly don't understand what I'm saying. Professor Sterling switched to Arabic mid-sentence, his eyes locked on Amara Johnson in the back row. His voice carried the smugness of someone who thought he held all the power. This ignorant girl probably thinks I'm complimenting her. He gestured dismissively at Amara while continuing in Arabic. Look at her blank expression. Typical. The other students shifted uncomfortably. They couldn't understand the Arabic, but Sterling's tone made his intent crystal clear. He stepped closer to Amara's desk, his voice growing more insulting. Your kind doesn't belong in serious academic spaces. You're here because of pity, not merit. Sterling turned back to the class, still speaking Arabic. She sits there like a confused child. This is what lowered standards give us. Amara remained perfectly still. Her face showed no reaction, no anger, no hurt. But her eyes held something dangerous, complete understanding. Have you ever watched someone humiliate themselves without even realizing it? Amara's mind flashed back to childhood dinners in Damascus. Her father's voice echoed through embassy halls, switching effortlessly between Arabic dialects as he negotiated with foreign ministers. She was 3 years old when she first spoke Arabic, 5 when she corrected a translator's mistake during a diplomatic meeting, 12 when she realized other kids didn't grow up with 5 languages swirling through their daily conversations. But American universities were different. Here, she'd learned to stay invisible. Sterling continued his Arabic tirade, emboldened by her silence. She probably thinks Arabic is just one language. These people have no concept of dialectical complexity. His confidence grew with each insult. I bet she's never even heard classical Arabic spoken properly. Her exposure is probably limited to whatever broken dialect her grandmother mumbles. Amara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her grandmother spoke 7 languages fluently and held 2 doctorate degrees. Watch this, Sterling announced to the class in Arabic. I'll use some advanced grammatical structures. She'll sit there nodding like she understands, but her eyes will give away her complete confusion. He launched into a complex explanation of Quranic Arabic grammar, deliberately using the most sophisticated constructions he knew. His voice carried the arrogance of someone showing off. See? Look at her face. Blank stare. No comprehension whatsoever. But Amara wasn't confused. She was angry, not just at Sterling's words, but at his butchered pronunciation. His grammar was technically correct, but culturally tone-deaf. He was mixing classical Arabic with modern standard Arabic like a student who'd learned everything from textbooks. Her father had taught her that language carried dignity, that Arabic wasn't just words, but the heartbeat of civilizations. Sterling was murdering that heartbeat with every mispronounced syllable. Perhaps our silent friend would like to contribute to the discussion. Sterling's Arabic grew more mocking. Oh, wait, she can't understand a single word I'm saying. The classroom held its breath. Some students looked embarrassed for Sterling, others seemed uncomfortable with the obvious cruelty. Amara slowly raised her head. Her hood fell back, revealing her face fully for the first time. Her dark eyes met Sterling's with laser focus. Something had shifted. The quiet girl in the corner was gone. Amara stood up slowly. Her chair scraped against the floor with deliberate precision. Every eye in the room locked onto her. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of generations. Professor Sterling. The words came out in flawless classical Arabic, each syllable pronounced with crystalline perfection. Your grammatical analysis contains several fundamental errors. The classroom exploded into stunned silence. Sterling's face was drained of color. Amara continued, her Arabic flowing like music. You've confused the subjunctive mood with the jussive. Your pronunciation suggests you learned from recordings rather than native speakers, and your cultural context is completely wrong. Students fumbled for their phones. This was happening. This was actually happening. Sterling's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible. I can't do what? Amara switched to Egyptian Arabic, her accent shifting effortlessly. Understand the language you've been using to insult me for the past 10 minutes? The shift hit like a thunderbolt. Egyptian Arabic sounded completely different from classical. Students who thought Arabic was just Arabic suddenly understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Or perhaps, she continued now in Levantine Arabic, you thought I couldn't recognize that you've been mispronouncing the pharyngeal consonants throughout your entire lecture? Sterling stumbled backward. How are you? Where did you? Amara's voice grew stronger. You said my people don't understand academic excellence. She switched to Moroccan Arabic, the dialect flowing like liquid silver. You said I was here because of pity, not merit. She stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. You said I probably think Arabic is just one language. Now she switched to Gulf Arabic, each transition seamless and natural. You were wrong about everything, Professor. The transformation was complete. The quiet girl in the hoodie had become a linguistic virtuoso. Students leaned forward, mesmerized. Your accent places you as someone who studied Arabic at university level but never lived in an Arabic-speaking country, Amara said, returning to English. Your vocabulary is academic but not cultural. You know the rules but not the rhythm. Sterling's hands shook. This is some kind of trick. No trick. Amara pulled out her phone and showed him the text she'd received earlier. Just a message from my father, in Arabic, asking how my linguistics class was going. She read the message aloud in Arabic, then translated. He wanted to know if I was learning anything new today. Her smile was sharp as a blade. I told him my professor was very educational. The room buzzed with electric energy. Students were recording everything. This would be on social media within minutes. You want to test my understanding? Amara challenged. Ask me anything. Classical poetry, modern political discourse, religious texts, regional dialects from Morocco to Iraq. Sterling's academic facade crumbled completely. I don't understand how. Where did you? I grew up in Arabic, Amara said simply. While you were studying it like a dead language, I was living it like a breath. She gestured toward his textbook. That book you're teaching from? I read it when I was 14. The author got 3 major historical references wrong. A student in the front row whispered, "Oh my God." Another said, "Are you getting this?" Sterling tried to regain control. Academic credentials still matter. Formal training still matters? Amara interrupted. Your formal training just got demolished by someone you assumed was intellectually inferior. She walked to the whiteboard and wrote out a complex Arabic sentence in perfect calligraphy. Translate this. Sterling stared at the board. The sentence used advanced grammatical structures he'd never encountered. I need to look this up. It's a line from Al-Mutanabi, Amara said. 10th century, but you wouldn't know that because you study Arabic like a language instead of understanding it like a culture. The pause stretched like a held breath. 23 students watched their professor's authority dissolve in real time. The hierarchy they'd accepted without question had just been turned upside down. Amara looked around the room. Does anyone else think I don't belong here? Dead silence. Sterling's world had just collapsed, and everyone had witnessed it happen. To understand what happened next, you need to know who Amara really was. Dr. Omar Johnson wasn't just any father. He was America's most respected Arabic scholar and diplomat. For 25 years, he'd served in U.S. embassies across the Middle East, bridging cultures through language. Amara's first words weren't mama or dada. They were welcome in Arabic. She spoke it before she could walk. Her childhood was a tapestry of languages. Embassy dinners in Jordan, where she chatted with foreign ministers' children in perfect regional dialects. Market trips in Morocco, where vendors taught her local expressions while her mother handled diplomatic business. School in Syria, where she learned classical Arabic alongside kids who'd grown up with it. By age 10, Amara was translating for American diplomats who struggled with regional dialects. By 15, she was sitting in on peace negotiations, catching nuances that professional interpreters missed. But America was different. Her first day at Roosevelt High, she'd enthusiastically corrected her Spanish teacher's pronunciation. The teacher's response still echoed in her mind. Some students need to learn when to speak and when to listen. The message was clear. Smart girls, especially black smart girls, were supposed to stay quiet. So she did. College meant starting over. New chance, new rules. But the same patterns emerged. Professors who assumed her financial aid was charity. Students who looked surprised when she answered questions correctly. Amara learned to sit in the back rows, to wear hoodies that hid her face, to let others shine while she absorbed everything like a sponge. Her father knew she was hiding. Your gift isn't meant to be buried, he'd tell her during their weekly calls. Language is meant to build bridges, not walls. But Amara had seen what happened to bridges in academic spaces. They got burned. So she cleaned tables at the campus coffee shop to pay tuition, studied alone in library corners, kept her multilingual brilliance locked away like a dangerous secret. Until today. Until Professor Sterling decided to humiliate her in a language he thought she couldn't understand. Until her father's daughter remembered who she really was. Some gifts are too powerful to stay buried forever. Sterling's face had turned the color of old parchment, but desperation made him dangerous. "Anyone can memorize phrases," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "True Arabic scholarship requires understanding complex classical texts." He rushed to his desk, hands shaking as he pulled out a leather-bound manuscript. "This is 12th century Arabic poetry, pre-Islamic tribal verse. Graduate students struggle with this." Sterling placed the ancient text in front of Amara like a gauntlet thrown down. "If you're so gifted, translate this. Prove your understanding goes beyond party tricks." The classroom leaned forward. Phones zoomed in on the yellowed pages covered in flowing Arabic script. Amara glanced at the text for maybe 30 seconds. Her lips moved silently as she read. "This is from the Wandering King poet," she said calmly. "6th century, not 12th. You've misdated your manuscript by 600 years. Sterling's eyes widened. That's impossible. The manuscript catalog clearly states, "The catalog is wrong." Amara's finger traced the ancient letters. "Look at the calligraphy style. These letter forms are characteristic of early script. The binding suggests it's a later copy, but the original text is definitely 6th century. She began translating, her voice carrying the rhythm of ancient poetry. "Stop. Let us weep at the memory of my beloved, at the traces of her encampment by the edge of the twisted sands." The words flowed like music, but Amara didn't stop at translation. "The poet is establishing the classic opening of the praise poem," she explained. "The mourning section where he grieves lost love. But notice how he uses the imperative stop. He's commanding his companions, showing his authority even in grief." Students frantically took notes. This was graduate-level analysis delivered with professorial authority. The geographical references were real places in pre-Islamic Arabia. The poet isn't just being poetic, he's anchoring his emotion in a specific landscape because tribal poetry was oral tradition. Listeners needed landmarks to remember the verses. Sterling grabbed another book, desperation making him reckless. "Fine. What about modern political Arabic? That's completely different." He found a recent news article on his tablet, something about Middle Eastern diplomacy. "Translate this. Real-time political discourse with contemporary terminology." Amara scanned the screen. "This article is about Syrian refugees in Jordan. The journalist is using formal modern standard Arabic, but you can tell from certain word choices that he's originally from Damascus." She read the headline aloud in English translation, then analyzed. "But notice how he uses one specific word for displacement instead of another. That's specifically regional usage. A Moroccan journalist would choose different terminology." "How can you possibly know that?" Sterling's voice pitched higher. "Because I've lived it," Amara said simply. "While you were studying it like a dead language, I was living it like a breath." She pointed to a specific paragraph. "Here, the writer mentions dignity, but in this context it carries layers of meaning about honor, respect, and family pride that English doesn't capture. You'd need 3 sentences to translate what he says in one word." Maya, a student in the 3rd row, started clapping. Others joined. The sound filled the room like thunder. Sterling stood frozen, watching his authority crumble in real time. "Any other tests, Professor?" Amara asked, her voice deadly quiet. The challenge hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Sterling's face twisted with something ugly. His academic mask had slipped completely. "This is exactly the problem," he snarled, his voice rising. "Students today think Google makes them scholars, think memorizing without understanding equals expertise." He gestured wildly at Amara. "How do we know this isn't just elaborate cheating? Some kind of smartphone app feeding you answers?" The accusation hit the room like a slap. Students exchanged shocked glances. This was beyond inappropriate. "Professor Sterling," Maya protested from the front row. "She obviously knows. Miss Martinez, I'll determine academic competency in my classroom." Sterling's voice cracked like a whip. "Not students who've been fooled by a performance." He turned back to Amara, his eyes burning with resentment. Your people have a long history of appropriating cultures they don't truly understand, taking surface-level exposure and pretending it's deep knowledge. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several students visibly recoiled. Sterling wasn't finished. I have a PhD from Oxford, 20 years of dedicated study. I've published papers in peer-reviewed journals. And you think growing up around Arabic makes you qualified to challenge my expertise? His voice grew more venomous. This is what happens when universities prioritize diversity over excellence. We get students who think their background gives them automatic authority over serious academic disciplines. Amara's hands clenched slightly. For the first time, doubt crept into her expression. Years of conditioning whispered in her head. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was overstepping. Maybe she should have stayed invisible. Look at her, Sterling said, sensing her hesitation. Now she realizes she's in over her head. This is what happens when people get ideas above their station. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her desk again. Your admission to this university was charity. Your presence in this classroom is tolerance. Don't mistake either for merit. The pause stretched like a held breath. Amara felt the weight of every stare. The phone cameras pointed at her. The viral video that would follow her forever. Maybe she should apologize, back down, disappear into her hoodie, and never speak up again. Sterling smiled, thinking he'd won. Perhaps our little display is over. Can we return to actual learning now? But then the classroom door opened. Dr. Margaret Mitchell, head of the linguistics department, stepped inside. Her heels clicked against the floor with authority. Professor Sterling, she said, her voice carrying the quiet power of real leadership. I couldn't help but overhear from the hallway. It sounded like quite an animated discussion about Arabic linguistics. Sterling's face went pale. Dr. Mitchell, we were just addressing some misconceptions. Misconceptions? Dr. Mitchell's eyebrow arched. From what I heard, someone was demonstrating remarkable fluency in multiple Arabic dialects. I'm quite interested to meet this scholar. The power dynamic shifted instantly. Real authority had entered the room. Actually, Dr. Mitchell continued, consulting her tablet. I came to discuss our new State Department partnership. They're looking for advanced Arabic speakers for a cultural preservation project. She looked around the room with interest. Perfect timing, it seems. Sterling's confidence evaporated completely. The department head hadn't heard his insults, but she'd clearly heard Amara's expertise. Now, Dr. Mitchell said with a smile, who was demonstrating this impressive Arabic knowledge? I'd very much like to hear more. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward Amara. The moment of truth had arrived. Dr. Mitchell's presence transformed the room's energy instantly. Her reputation preceded her, fair, brilliant, and utterly intolerant of academic prejudice. Dr. Mitchell, Sterling stammered, we were just having a classroom discussion about Arabic dialectical variations. So I heard. Mitchell's smile was sharp as surgical steel. And from what I gathered, someone demonstrated exceptional knowledge of regional linguistic patterns. She pulled out her tablet and consulted her notes. Actually, your timing is perfect. The State Department just awarded us a major grant for Arabic dialect preservation. We need someone with advanced cultural fluency. Sterling's eyes lit up with desperate hope. My graduate students have excellent qualifications. I could recommend several candidates who... Wonderful, Mitchell interrupted smoothly. Perhaps we could hear a demonstration? I have a diplomatic translation here that's been giving our graduate program some trouble. She held up an official document. This is from recent negotiations in Jordan. It requires understanding of both formal diplomatic Arabic and regional cultural context. Sterling practically lunged forward. Of course, I'd be happy to demonstrate the proper approach to diplomatic translation. He took the document with shaking hands, his voice gaining confidence as he began translating. But within seconds, his mistakes became obvious. The ambassador requests immediate consideration of the proposal. Sterling read, stumbling over complex phrasing. Amara winced. He'd completely missed the subtle diplomatic language that actually meant the opposite, a polite rejection disguised as courtesy. Sterling continued, growing more confident with each error. The Cultural Ministry expresses enthusiasm for continued cooperation. Another complete misread. The phrasing was formal diplomatic speak for, we're ending this partnership. Dr. Mitchell watched with growing concern. Professor Sterling, are you certain about that translation? The implications seem quite significant. Absolutely certain, Sterling declared. 20 years of Arabic study has given me deep insight into diplomatic language patterns. The pause stretched uncomfortably. I see, Mitchell said carefully. And no one else has thoughts on this translation? She looked around the room expectantly. Students shifted nervously. They couldn't read Arabic, but they could sense something was wrong. Amara raised her hand slowly. Yes, Mitchell encouraged. The translation contains several critical errors, Amara said quietly. Professor Sterling has misread the diplomatic subtext entirely. Sterling's face flushed red. That's completely inappropriate. This student has no qualifications to challenge. What did I miss? Mitchell asked Amara directly, ignoring Sterling's protests. The document isn't expressing enthusiasm, Amara explained. It's a formal rejection using polite diplomatic language. When they say immediate consideration, they mean we're declining but want to maintain face. The Cultural Ministry isn't offering cooperation, they're ending the partnership while preserving diplomatic courtesy. Mitchell's eyebrows rose. That's a completely different interpretation. How can you be so certain? Because diplomatic Arabic uses specific courtesy formulas to soften negative responses, Amara continued. Professor Sterling translated the literal words but missed the cultural meaning. In Middle Eastern diplomacy, direct refusal would be insulting, so they embed rejection in politeness. She pointed to specific phrases. These aren't expressions of interest. They're exit strategies designed to preserve relationships while ending negotiations. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sterling had just demonstrated complete incompetence in front of the department head. Worse, he'd been corrected by the student he'd spent the last 20 minutes humiliating. Fascinating, Dr. Mitchell said slowly. This level of cultural interpretation suggests extensive immersion experience. Where did you develop this expertise? Amara hesitated. The truth would change everything. I grew up in diplomatic circles, she said simply. Mitchell's eyes sharpened with sudden interest. Sterling's world was about to get much worse. Dr. Mitchell's expression shifted from interest to recognition. Diplomatic circles. Johnson, are you related to Dr. Omar Johnson? The classroom collectively held its breath. Even students who didn't know the name could sense its importance from Mitchell's tone. He's my father, Amara said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Mitchell's face lit up with genuine excitement. Dr. Omar Johnson is your father? The diplomatic scholar? The Arabic cultural attaché who's advised 3 different administrations? Sterling's face went from red to ashen white. The blood drained so quickly he had to grip his desk for support. Professor Sterling, Dr. Mitchell continued, her voice gaining authority. You do realize, Dr. Johnson is considered the foremost American expert on Arabic diplomatic language. His cultural interpretation methods are taught at Georgetown, Harvard, and the Foreign Service Institute. She turned back to Amara with newfound respect. This explains everything. Your analysis just now demonstrated the exact methodology your father pioneered, cultural context over literal translation. Sterling's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. The man he'd spent years trying to impress professionally was the father of the student he'd just humiliated publicly. I had no idea, he whispered, his career flashing before his eyes. Of course you didn't, Dr. Mitchell said coolly. You were too busy making assumptions based on appearances. She addressed the class directly. Students, you've just witnessed something remarkable. Miss Johnson has demonstrated the kind of cultural fluency that our graduate program aspires to develop. This is what true linguistic expertise looks like. The validation hit like a wave. Students began nodding, phones still recording everything. Professor Sterling, Mitchell continued, her voice carrying quiet authority. I'm curious about your pedagogical approach today. From what I observed, there seemed to be some tension in your classroom management. Sterling's hands trembled. Dr. Mitchell, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding about academic qualifications and... Misunderstanding? Mitchell's eyebrow arched dangerously. From what I heard, Miss Johnson demonstrated superior knowledge to anything I've seen from our graduate students. What exactly was misunderstood? The trap was closing. Sterling realized that anything he said now would only make things worse. "Perhaps," Mitchell suggested with deceptive gentleness, "we should discuss this further in my office, after class." The threat was clear. Sterling's teaching methods were about to face serious scrutiny. She turned back to Amara with a warm smile. "Miss Johnson, I'd very much like to discuss research opportunities with you. Our Arabic preservation project could benefit enormously from your cultural insights." The reversal was complete. 20 minutes ago, Amara was being humiliated as unqualified. Now she was being recruited by the department head. "Your father would be proud," Mitchell added softly. The emotional beat hit like a gentle hammer. Amara's eyes misted slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. 23 students watched their quiet classmate transform into a recognized scholar before their eyes. Sterling stood isolated, his prejudices exposed, his authority shattered. Justice had arrived wearing academic robes. After class was dismissed, Dr. Mitchell walked beside Amara across the autumn campus. Golden leaves crunched under their feet. Students passed by, still buzzing about what they'd witnessed. "You know," Mitchell said gently, "I was first-generation college myself. Worked 3 jobs to pay tuition. I understand what it's like to feel like you don't belong in academic spaces." Amara pulled her hoodie closer. "Some days I wonder if hiding was the right choice. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet." "Quiet?" Mitchell's voice carried genuine surprise. "You just delivered the most sophisticated linguistic analysis I've heard in months. Why would you ever want to hide that gift?" They found a bench near the library. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold. Somewhere in the distance, a student played guitar on the quad. "Growing up, my grandmother always told me stories," Amara said softly. "She spoke 5 languages, but people only saw her as the cleaning lady at the embassy. I learned early that being smart wasn't always safe." Mitchell nodded with understanding. "Intelligence can be threatening to people who feel insecure about their own knowledge." "My father always said language was a bridge between worlds," Amara continued. "But sometimes I feel like I'm standing on that bridge alone, not quite fitting anywhere." "Your father is right about bridges," Mitchell said. "But he left out something important. Bridges need strong foundations. You are that foundation." A group of international students walked by, chatting in multiple languages. Their voices created a symphony of cultures mixing freely. "You see that?" Mitchell pointed toward them. "That's the future of academia, not Sterling's narrow vision of who belongs in scholarly spaces." Amara watched the students disappear around a corner. "He made me feel like an imposter, like my knowledge wasn't real because I didn't earn it the traditional way." "Traditional?" Mitchell laughed. "Amara, you learned Arabic by living it. You absorbed culture through your skin. That's not traditional. That's extraordinary." She leaned forward, her voice earnest. "Some of our best doctoral students couldn't do what you did today. They know the grammar, but they don't understand the soul of the language." The words settled between them like a gift. "Your grandmother was right to tell you stories," Mitchell added. "Stories carry truth that textbooks can't teach. Your knowledge isn't just academic, it's ancestral, it's lived, it's real." For the first time all day, Amara smiled genuinely. "What happens now?" she asked. Mitchell's eyes sparkled with possibility. "Now we show the world what real scholarship looks like." The connection was complete. 2 women from different generations, united by the belief that talent deserves recognition regardless of packaging. 1 week later, Professor Sterling stood at the front of his classroom like a man walking to his execution. His hands shook as he shuffled through his notes. The past 7 days had been torture. Videos of his humiliation had gone viral. Students whispered in hallways. Colleagues avoided eye contact. But today would be different. Today would restore his reputation. "Class," he announced with forced enthusiasm, "we have a very special guest lecturer, a distinguished scholar whose expertise in Arabic linguistics is renowned worldwide." Sterling's voice gained confidence as he warmed to his prepared speech. "Dr. Omar Johnson has served as cultural attaché to 5 different Middle Eastern countries. His work on diplomatic Arabic has influenced international policy for decades." Students looked up with interest. This sounded impressive. "Dr. Johnson has graciously agreed to share his insights on Arabic and international relations. This is truly an honor for our humble program. Sterling straightened his tie. He'd spent the entire week preparing for this moment. Today, he would impress the great Dr. Johnson. Today, he would prove his scholarly worth. The classroom door opened. Dr. Omar Johnson entered with the quiet dignity of a man who'd spent decades in diplomatic circles. Tall, distinguished, wearing a perfectly tailored Navy suit, his presence commanded immediate respect. Sterling practically bounced with excitement. Dr. Johnson, welcome to our Advanced Arabic Linguistics course. I cannot express how honored we are to have such a distinguished scholar grace our classroom. Dr. Johnson nodded politely and scanned the room. His eyes stopped briefly on the back corner where Amara sat in her usual hoodie. The slightest smile crossed his face. Thank you, Professor Sterling. I'm delighted to be here. Sterling launched into an elaborate introduction detailing Dr. Johnson's credentials, his publications, and his diplomatic achievements. The performance was painful to watch. Perhaps, Dr. Johnson said gently, we could begin with some practical examples. I find students learn best through demonstration. Absolutely, Sterling agreed eagerly. I was just discussing the complexity of Arabic diplomatic language with my students. Perhaps you could elaborate on the finer points? Dr. Johnson moved to the whiteboard with fluid grace. Diplomatic Arabic requires understanding context beyond mere translation. Cultural nuance often matters more than literal meaning. He wrote out a sentence in an elegant Arabic script. Professor Sterling, perhaps you could translate this diplomatic phrase for the class? Sterling approached the board confidently. This was his chance to shine. He studied the sentence carefully, then began translating with academic precision. The minister expresses gratitude for the proposal and looks forward to future discussions, he announced proudly. Dr. Johnson's expression remained diplomatically neutral. Interesting interpretation. And you're confident about that translation? Absolutely, Sterling declared. The language is quite straightforward. I see. Dr. Johnson turned to address the class. Students in diplomatic contexts, precision matters enormously. A mistranslation can damage international relationships. He paused meaningfully. Professor Sterling has just translated a polite rejection as enthusiastic acceptance. The room fell silent. Sterling's face went pale. I'm sure that's not... The phrase looks forward to future discussions in this context means we're ending negotiations but maintaining courtesy, Dr. Johnson explained calmly. In diplomatic Arabic, direct refusal would be insulting, so rejection is embedded in politeness. Sterling stood frozen, his reputation crumbling again. Perhaps, Dr. Johnson continued, one of your students might offer a different perspective. I heard there was quite an impressive display of Arabic knowledge in this classroom recently. Every eye turned toward Amara. Sterling's world began collapsing in slow motion. Miss Johnson, Dr. Johnson said with gentle formality, would you care to demonstrate proper diplomatic interpretation? The use of her last name hit the room like lightning. Students' heads whipped back and forth between Amara and Dr. Johnson. The family resemblance was suddenly obvious. Same intelligent eyes, same quiet dignity, same commanding presence. Amara stood slowly, pulling back her hoodie. Hello, Dad, she said simply. The classroom exploded. Phones came out instantly. Students gasped audibly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, that's his daughter." Sterling's face cycled through confusion, realization, and absolute horror. The great Dr. Omar Johnson, the man he'd spent years trying to impress, was the father of the student he'd humiliated publicly just 1 week ago? Sterling's voice came out as a croak. Yes, Dr. Johnson said calmly. Amara is my daughter. And from what I understand, she recently demonstrated the exact cultural interpretation skills we've been discussing. The irony was devastating. Sterling had insulted the daughter of his academic idol while trying to show off his Arabic expertise. Amara walked to the front of the room with newfound confidence. Father and daughter stood together, representing 2 generations of linguistic excellence. Shall we demonstrate proper diplomatic analysis? Dr. Johnson asked his daughter. What followed was a masterclass in Arabic cultural interpretation. Father and daughter conducted a bilingual dialogue, seamlessly switching between English and Arabic, demonstrating different dialectical applications. Their conversation revealed years of shared academic passion. inside jokes about linguistic quirks, references to diplomatic experiences Sterling could only dream of. The class watched in awe as Sterling's quiet student transformed into a scholar worthy of international respect. "Students," Dr. Johnson addressed the room, "true Arabic fluency isn't just about grammar rules. It's about understanding the culture that shapes how people choose their words." He looked directly at Sterling. "It's about respecting the language enough to learn it properly." The message was clear. Sterling's textbook approach was amateur compared to lived cultural experience. "Amara," Dr. Johnson continued, "perhaps you could explain to the class how diplomatic Arabic differs from classical Arabic?" For the next 20 minutes, Amara delivered a graduate-level lecture that surpassed anything Sterling had ever managed. Her knowledge was deep, cultural, and utterly authentic. Students recorded everything. This was going viral again, but this time as celebration, not humiliation. Sterling stood silently in the corner, watching his career dissolve. The quiet girl he'd dismissed as intellectually inferior was actually the daughter of America's most respected Arabic scholar, and everyone had witnessed his spectacular misjudgment. The video exploded across social media within hours. "Professor gets schooled by student's legendary father" racked up 2 million views by midnight. The comment section became a celebration of justice served cold. "Plot twist of the century," read the top comment with 50,000 likes. "Karma has a PhD," wrote another. "Never underestimate the quiet kid in the back row." By morning, major news outlets had picked up the story. CNN ran it as "When Academic Prejudice Meets Perfect Justice." The Washington Post titled their piece "The Language of Consequences." The international media picked it up. Al Jazeera interviewed Dr. Johnson about cultural competency in American universities. The story resonated globally because everyone recognized the injustice of talent being dismissed due to prejudice. Sterling's world had gone silent. The university administration moved swiftly. An investigation into his classroom conduct revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning years. Multiple students came forward with similar stories of public humiliation and cultural insensitivity. Former students testified about being mocked for their accents, dismissed for their backgrounds, humiliated for asking questions Sterling deemed beneath the academic level. Within 2 weeks, Sterling's teaching load was reduced. Within a month, he'd quietly accepted a position at a small community college in rural Montana. His academic reputation never recovered. Meanwhile, Amara's life transformed overnight. The State Department called personally, offering prestigious internship positions. Harvard's linguistics department sent recruitment materials. Oxford extended an invitation for summer research. The Smithsonian requested her input on their Arabic cultural exhibition. Georgetown University offered her a full graduate fellowship with a focus on diplomatic Arabic interpretation. Yale's International Relations program created a custom track combining linguistics with cultural diplomacy. The same week, Dr. Mitchell announced the creation of the Dr. Omar Johnson Scholarship for Cultural Linguistic Excellence, a full-ride program for students from underrepresented backgrounds who demonstrated exceptional cultural language skills. Amara was its first recipient. The scholarship ceremony took place in the university's grand auditorium. Local media covered the event. The mayor attended. Senator Williams sent a congratulatory letter read aloud to the audience. Representatives from 12 different embassies came to honor the Johnson family's diplomatic service. Dr. Johnson sat in the front row, his pride visible from space. 6 months ago, Amara addressed the packed auditorium. "I sat in the back of classrooms hiding my abilities because I thought being different meant being less worthy." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who'd found their true strength. "One professor's prejudice taught me that staying silent isn't protection, it's surrender. Your gifts aren't meant to be hidden. They're meant to build bridges between worlds that have forgotten how to speak to each other." The audience erupted in a standing ovation. Students waved flags from their home countries. Faculty members wiped away tears. But the most meaningful moment came after the ceremony. Dr. Johnson approached the podium carrying a small, leather-bound book wrapped in silk cloth. The auditorium fell silent as father faced daughter. "This belonged to your great-grandmother Fatima," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She carried it from Morocco to America in 1952. It's a collection of Arabic poetry that sustained her through the hardest years of her life." He unwrapped the cloth carefully, revealing an ancient book with gold-embossed Arabic calligraphy on the cover. She worked as a seamstress during the day and studied English at night. People told her Arabic was useless in America, that she should forget her language and assimilate completely. Dr. Johnson placed the book in Amara's hands. The leather was soft with age, worn smooth by generations of careful handling. But she kept this book. She read to your grandmother in Arabic. Your grandmother read to me in Arabic. I read to you in Arabic. This language has carried our family's dreams across oceans and through decades. Amara opened the book carefully. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with flowing Arabic script in her great-grandmother's careful handwriting. Margin notes in 3 languages showed how she'd translated difficult passages. She always said that language was the one thing no one could take away from you, that words carried the power to change worlds, to preserve cultures, to connect hearts across any distance. Dr. Johnson's voice broke slightly. She would have been so proud to see you today, standing here, speaking for all the voices that have been silenced. The emotional beat hit like a tidal wave. 4 generations of women connected through language, through courage, through the refusal to be diminished. Cameras captured the moment. The image would become iconic. A young black woman holding her linguistic heritage, surrounded by academic regalia, representing everything American education could be at its best. 3 months later, Amara returned to Sterling's former classroom. But now she stood at the front. Dr. Mitchell had asked her to guest lecture on cultural competency in language education. The same room where she'd once been humiliated had become her platform for empowerment. The university had renovated the space. Gone were the intimidating rows of desks. Instead, tables arranged in a circle encouraged collaboration. Flags from around the world decorated the walls. A quote in 12 languages read, "Every language is a world of possibility." 25 new students filled the seats, a deliberately diverse group recruited through the new scholarship program. They represented 15 different countries and spoke 37 languages combined. "Language isn't just grammar rules," Amara began, her voice carrying across the room with quiet authority. "It's the heartbeat of civilizations. It's the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming." She gestured toward the back corner where she used to hide. "Never let anyone convince you that your background is a limitation. Your culture is your strength. Your difference is your superpower." 1 year later, Amara stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The invitation had come from the Secretary General himself. The UN was launching a global initiative to preserve endangered languages, and they wanted Amara to address the opening session. She looked out at delegates from 193 countries, each representing cultures and languages that deserved protection and respect. 12 months ago, she began, her voice carrying across the vast hall, I was hiding in the back row of a classroom, convinced that my multilingual abilities were something to be ashamed of. Translators worked frantically in the booths above, converting her words into dozens of languages simultaneously. Today, I stand before you as proof that every voice matters. Every language carries wisdom. Every culture holds keys to understanding our shared humanity. The audience leaned forward. This wasn't a typical diplomatic speech. This was personal testimony with global implications. The professor who tried to silence me taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. He showed me that prejudice thrives in silence, but it dies in the light of demonstrated excellence. Amara gestured toward the gallery where her father sat beaming with pride. My great-grandmother carried a book of Arabic poetry from Morocco to America. She was told to forget her language, to abandon her culture. Instead, she planted seeds that grew into trees of knowledge spanning 4 generations. She held up the ancient book, now carefully preserved in a protective case. This book represents millions of stories, families who preserved their languages despite pressure to assimilate, students who code-switched between cultures, children who served as translators for parents navigating new countries. The emotional weight of the moment settled over the assembly. But how many brilliant minds have we lost to silence? How many languages have disappeared because we failed to recognize their value? How many children have hidden their gifts because they were told they didn't belong? Delegates from small nations nodded with recognition. They understood the pain of linguistic marginalization. The solution isn't just tolerance. It's a celebration. It's creating spaces where multilingual minds can flourish. It's recognizing that diversity of thought requires diversity of language. Amara's voice gained strength with each word. Every person in this room speaks at least 2 languages. You are bridges between worlds. You carry the power to connect cultures that might otherwise remain divided. She looked directly at the youth delegate section. To every young person watching this, hiding their linguistic abilities, afraid to stand out, your voice is needed. Your perspective matters. The world is waiting for the bridges only you can build. The assembly hall buzzed with energy. This wasn't just a speech about language preservation, it was a call to action for human dignity. The professor who humiliated me is now teaching basic English at a community college. His prejudice cost him everything. But his attempted silencing of my voice ultimately amplified it to reach this global stage. Amara paused, letting the irony sink in. Sometimes the people who try to diminish us end up elevating us higher than we ever imagined possible. She closed with her great-grandmother's favorite saying, translated directly, "The tree that bends in the storm survives, but the tree with deep roots grows tall." Your linguistic heritage is your root system. Draw strength from it. Grow tall with it. But never let anyone convince you to uproot it. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. That evening, Amara's speech trended globally in 15 languages. Students from universities worldwide shared their own stories of linguistic discrimination and triumph. Language's strength became a movement. Universities began implementing cultural competency training for faculty. The Johnson Scholarship Program expanded to 50 schools. Congressional hearings examined discrimination in higher education. But the most meaningful response came from a message forwarded by Dr. Mitchell. "Dear Amara," it read, "my name is Sophia. I'm a freshman who speaks 4 languages but never raised my hand in class because I was afraid of my accent. After watching your UN speech, I answered a question in my philosophy class today. The professor said my perspective was exactly what the discussion needed. Thank you for showing me that the difference isn't less than, it's more than that." Amara smiled, remembering her own journey from silence to voice. She opened her laptop and began typing her response to Sophia. Then to the hundreds of other students who'd reached out. The cycle continued, voices finding other voices, bridges building more bridges. Her great-grandmother's poetry book sat open beside her laptop, its ancient wisdom illuminating modern possibilities. "Language is power," Amara whispered. "But sharing language is a revolution." Outside her window, the world waited for more bridges to be built. She was ready to help build them.